I created a Sisi in my film that's very interesting from our perspective now. I don't know if the original Sisi was, in fact, that interesting, but of course it's a myth that everyone loves because she's, the last empress of Europe. And of course, everyone loves princesses and dresses and castles and all of that. So, she's quite, and I think also Austria has done a pretty good job in making her a symbol to avoid talking about other things in history that were not so pleasant. So that's my theory about it. But I think a lot of the interpretations today, like the real Sisi, I don't think she was a feminist at all. She didn't have a very good taste, to be honest, things like that. So I kind of changed all of that for my film because for me, it was not so much about her, but more about the relationship between these two women and about the question, what happens, if you work for the most powerful woman of your time and you fall in love with her and she's kind of, not always treating you nicely, and sometimes she does and sometimes she doesn't. So it was more about this whole idea of this relationship between these two women than about her.
How much is the relationship between Irma and Sisi based in power and kind of abuse?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it is all about that. And it's something I think that we all know. Someone came up to me after screening and was crying actually after the film and said, this reminded me of this boy in my school that I really wanted to be friends with. And one day he asked me to play football with him. And I, was really, I mean, this was the best thing that had ever happened to me. And next day he didn't talk to me anymore. It's kind of like we know these things from childhood on, that we are fascinated by someone, we want to be friends with someone. And finally that person sees you. And that's, a thing in the film that's reoccurring, like lights on, lights off. And then suddenly that person doesn't look at you anymore. And of course, from, more like a job perspective, I also wanted to talk a bit about, what happens when you work for someone in a very powerful position and that person actually, you're very fascinated. You're happy that you got this job because it's the best job that you could get. In Irma's case, it is the best job of her time that is offered to her. And then she falls in love with this woman, and at times, Sisi really seems to enjoy her company. And at other times, she completely shut her off. And that's kind of like a process that gets Irma ready for the end of the film that I'm not going to spoil right now, but it's a process of going through these, on and off moments with Sisi.
The way you portrayed her, which is fine. I'm not talking about the difference between the real Sisi and your Sisi. Yeah, as you said, it's a exploration of the relationship of two women, that one is in love and the other is very powerful and all that. But the way you show us her is like I think she, in a way, she was born too early, because don't you
Yeah,
think?
definitely. Yes, definitely. She was and she wasn't, because when you look at the 19th century and how aristocratic women were living at the time, they were not like, bourgeois housewives that were locked away, whatever. They actually were allowed to do whatever they wanted to. They had money, they could buy all the clothes they wanted to, they were allowed to travel, they learned languages, and they could sleep with whoever they wanted to, men and women alike. And it was very common. And it's interesting to see the discussion that we've had, especially in the last 5 years, about women trying to get back that kind of freedom. It was already there, 150 years ago. And so that's why I found it quite interesting to set that piece in that period where it was quite common. We know about Sisi, she had lots of affairs with men and women. Women spent a lot of time together because they traveled together. A lot of the times the men weren't present. They hung out together, in their quarters and whatever. So, there was all kinds of things going on. And I found that just interesting that we now, because sometimes she's portrayed nowadays as like this desperate housewife that sits at home and she's like miserable and whatever. She was nothing like that. She really had, apart from being manic depressive, which is another thing we can talk about, but she had a lot of fun,
I think that setting up the story in Corfu gives the narrative something very sensual. the plants, the air, I don't know, the ocean. It makes it it makes it easier to fall in love with this woman who is not very nice to Irma. How do you think the location helps for people to, when I watched the film, I felt in love with every little detail, you know, the lizards, the ocean, you can start thinking of Greece and I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that because she did spend, we were talking about the last years of her life, and she didn't spend any of that in Vienna. She was away as much as she could because she hated it there. And it is intimidating, you know, it's like these cold, big palaces, and there's a certain, you know, protocol that she had to follow, which meant no privacy. So, of course, I mean, I wanted to create a place, which she actually had. She had a house in Corfu, which looked quite different from the one that we see in my film. But anyway, that's another story. So I really
The
wanted
one
to
in your
show.
film is really beautiful. I loved it.
Yes, it's beautiful. It's actually in Malta. It's not in Greece, but no, but the original palace, I have to say, she built it at the time. It wasn't very nice. As I said, she didn't have a very good taste, I think, the real Sisi. And then it sold to the German emperor at some point, who did some renovations and made it even worse. I mean, it's horrible. It's still in Corfu. You can go and visit it, but it has no soul, that house. So I was looking for kind of, you know, like a lived-in, warm, beautiful house that feels like people are actually having a good time at it and not, you know, which is not a repetition of what would happen in Vienna at all. And so, yeah, that was the plan. And I really wanted to show her private life away from the court and, you know, and trying to be the person who she actually wants to be until then, you know, like her, yeah, politics kind of tried to get her back on track, to say the least. But yeah.
There are two men in the, no, three men, Victor, the captain, well, two prominent, because the third one is like he's working for her. So what do you think of the men in the film?
Okay,
What do
we
they
have.
bring in? What do they bring into the story?
So Victor, who's the cousin, he's the brother of the emperor,
He's
who
so
is
fun.
actually, yeah, he's so fun. And he is actually, he is, you know, it was very much known that he was gay because there was a scandal in Vienna in the bath for men where he got into trouble. And then the emperor, who really loved him, he decided to just put him in some palace in Salzburg and, you know, to shut him up. But yeah, and nobody really talks about that in Austria. You know, nobody really says that, you know, I mean, it's documented that there was the scandal with the men in the bath, and, you know, people still don't say it, that he was actually gay. So, and I know, you know, in real life, because he had quite a sharp tongue, to say the least, so people feared him quite a bit, but I made him much nicer and much more fun. And yeah, so I think it was important to have this man that she, you know, who's not interested in her sexually, but who's there, they're incredibly close, you know, they also physically, they're almost like, you know, lying together on the sofa and, you know, whatever. They're this just, you know, to have this character that is actually probably the only man in this film who actually loves her just because he enjoys being with her, not because he has any interest in loving her. So, you know, that's him. And then, of course, you know, I don't know, the captain, of course, is just the sexy love interest that, you know,
A toy boy.
like a toy boy. Yeah. And then, okay, the emperor, I mean, he's just an idiot, basically, right? I mean, that's, which is, yeah, I mean, which I think, you know, in real life, at times he probably was that, and I made him even a bit more idiotic, I guess. And yeah, anyway, it's funny because, you know, some of the guys working at the film, you know, because not everyone reads the screenplay like in terms of the story, they read it for like technical reasons or whatever. So at some point, one of them said to me, "Have you realized that all the men in this films are idiots?" And I said, "Well, not all of them, but yeah, kind of." You know, they were kind of getting fed up with these guys in the film.
It's
But
true.
anyway, no, yeah.
I thought the most likable was Victor.
Yes, of course.
because it's the most real, and I love when he wears a corset. He's the
Yeah.
more playful.
Yeah, and he's so gentle with her, you know, in the last scene where he puts on the kind of death mask, the makeup. And it's interesting because that, you know, the actor, Georg Friedrich, he's actually someone who normally plays quite shady gangster types. And it was interesting to see how gentle he was with Susanne Wolff, you know, as Sissy when he puts on the makeup in the one of the last scenes of the films. It was really moving. I didn't see and didn't know that side of him, you know. It's
It's
nice.
great. I was very impressed. I swear by you know the way you use the music in the themes that the music was is from now or from yeah, and you're telling a
Mhm.
story from years ago, so it worked really well. Were you trying to be irreverent, or you're just it brings some irreverence, which is good, you know, to a costume drama that are all stiff. You bring this music, so it's a way of
Yeah.
making fun of the gender. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of, you know, I always, when I work, I listen to music and I listen to songs, and then I have ideas for a screenplay or for a scene or a character, which happened in this case too. I listened to the Portishead song, you know, that we hear in the beginning, and I was like, wow, that's the story of Sissy and Irma. So I had this playlist while, you know, working on the screenplay and that. And what I normally do with my last film, I play songs to actors when we shoot a scene that I had in mind while writing it. And then in this case, I was like, okay, I have the music, then we use 60 millimeter film. So that was like already a kind of, you know, very different look to, you know, digital film and all of that. And then the costumes happened, you know, which was also the plan because I was looking at clothes from the 60s and 70s, mainly by Valentino and Fendi, like the big Italian designer who invented this new, modern, very confident, beautiful, elegant type of woman in the 60s and 70s. So all of that came together. And so then I decided just to try to use the music that my playlist actually for the film, not knowing if that would actually work out, but it did. So yeah, so anyway, so it was very fun to edit the, you know, the film then with those songs in mind.
How satisfied are you with the film? You're like,
Oh, I love it because I had the best time. I mean, you know, the costumes, which was the first thing that we did, because this was all kind of, you know, between lockdowns and things, so not everyone could be everywhere all the time. And we had to start early because of Sandra having other obligations and things. So, I mean, months and months of making clothes. Every single piece in this film is made for the people. You know, it's not that we bought them somewhere, and it was just so much fun. And the same, you know, with like the dinner parties and the food and like all the stuff that we created for the film. It was very depressing to come home and go back into my, you know, my own life because I was gone for a year, and then I decided to have a dinner party the first night I came back, and I was like, where's the staff? Where's the incredible food? And I was like, oh, I guess I have to make it myself. And then I opened my closet and I was like, oh my God, I can't wear these clothes, you know, because I lived in this world of like, you know, the kind of, yeah,
like in the
beautiful.
movie, you were in the movie for a year and a yeah.
Yeah, it was super, and I had an amazing time. It was really, yeah, it was beautiful, and especially, you know, after COVID, because that's when we started filming, to, you know, travel around, because we traveled quite a lot with the film to shoot in these incredible locations after having been locked up at home, you know. It was just yeah, and I was very energetic, like, you know, after picture lock, I was like, okay, what am I doing now? You know, it wasn't like I was tired or anything. I could have gone on forever.
So, last question. You come from the world of documentaries, I think.
Yeah, well, that's yeah, sort
No?
of, but um, yeah,
Uh,
it's hard to explain. I applied for documentary filmmaking in film school because in the film school where I went to, that class was the most free class, so you could do whatever you wanted to. You could do fiction, documentary,
hmm.
art, films, whatever, and that's how. And so I did a couple of documentaries, which but where people thought actually they were fiction. So I've always been playing with these genres a bit, and you know, for me, it's kind of yeah, it's always about telling a story. So there's not so much difference to me, but I quite enjoy fiction. I can't imagine really going back to documentary because, like I said, the clothes and the sets and all of that.
Oh,
It's
you created
much
a
fun.
really fun and interesting world.
Thank you.
No, it's true.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, the dinners were amazing, even though they were bulimic, but
Oh yeah, that dinner. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah,
they were
that was quite a scene to shoot, I have to say. But I really like that scene. It's so brutal. It's terrifying.
Can
Yeah,
I stop recording and ask you something off the record?
of course.
Okay, hold on. There's nothing wrong with what I'm asking, but it's just for the editor to